Welcome everyone to the BarraTheWorld FG NA+ turbo build, where we're going to be installing a turbo onto our 2012 FG Mark II.
The reason why we're recording this conversion is because we regularly get asked questions like, what parts do I need to turbo my NA Barra, whether it's either in a Falcon or a conversion like a Land Cruiser? What power can I expect on the dyno from my NA+T? How much boost can I run on factory injectors? These are all actually really good questions, but they're really difficult to answer because there's so many variables, like what parts were used in your conversion. What fuel was used when you got the tune done. It's very difficult to sort of answer. So what we've done is we've pieced together a kit that we're going to throw at our Barra so we can turbo it, and we're going to get it tuned on 98, and we'll see where that takes us. So we'll see what power we make and what limits us.
This here is our 2012 FG Mark II XR6 valve, running a 6HP 26ZF transmission. It has 300,000 Ks on the clock, but at some point it's had an engine replacement, so realistically we have no idea how many kilometers are on this motor. We are going to be doing the turbo conversion using the standard injectors, standard valve springs, standard oil pump gears, and it's a completely unopened motor. The conversion will be purely bolt-on, so nothing internally will be touched.
The conversion is going to be carried out in a home garage using everyday tools such as spanners, sockets, screwdrivers, etc. No specialty equipment like welders or hoist will be used during this conversion. Any unique tools required for this conversion will be explained as we go.
Alrighty, so that's the car, the environment we're doing it in, and why we're doing it. So let's take a look at some of the parts we're going to be using for the conversion.
Alright, so we're going to take a look at first the main feature of this kit, which is the Pulsar 6682, which is the equivalent of a Garrett GDX 3582. Comes with a 4-inch anti-surge compressor housing. We've opted for the T51R mod for those crisp induction noises. A 10-blade billet front wheel, dual ceramic ball bearing core, a 1.06 AR rear housing with a Ford 5-bolt dump pattern on the rear, which is internally gated, and we've opted for the 10 PSI internally gated spring.
Yeah, so these turbos here are oil lubricated and water cooled. So for the oil feed, we're going to be using a speed flow oil line with an inline filter. And for the oil drain and water lines, we're going to be using an assortment of Raceworks fittings and braided hose. To mount the turbo to the motor, we had Fabricators Warehouse replicate the factory turbo FG manifold position. So the reason we've gone with the factory position is so when we do mount the turbo up, we can use off-the-shelf dump pipes, intercooler piping without any modifications.
This is actually the very first one that's ever been made. So we're going to do some product testing with it. We have welded on a fitting so that when it's on the dyno, we can run this to a gauge and we can actually measure the back pressure in the manifold itself, which is going to ensure that it flows correctly. To make our lives easier as well, we've got some Champion studs, which are going to go to the head and the T3 turbo, just make assembly a lot easier. Now, as we mentioned earlier about the factory position and the Ford 5-bolt rear housing on the turbo, this is going to allow us to use an off-the-shelf Venom Exhaust. The Venom Exhaust consists of a 4-inch dump to a 4-inch cat, which steps down to a 3.5-inch pipe, which then splits off into two 2.5-inch pipes, which run the majority of the length of the car. There's 2 mufflers and 2 chrome tips. The reasoning behind having the twin 2.5-inch pipes underneath the car is purely for ground clearance. So as opposed to running one 4-inch pipe the entire way, you're actually going to achieve a fair bit more ground clearance. So for all you Stancy boys out there, it's a big benefit for you guys too.
So onto the intercooler. For price point, we have opted for the Auto Technica intercooler kit. It's an aluminium intercooler with aluminium 2.5-inch piping and silicon joiners and hose clamps to match. Now this piping kit is to suit a factory FG turbo, so mating it to our NA manifold will have one piece missing. So once we get onto the car, we'll be able to measure up exactly what pipe we need, and we'll get that in and install it at that time.
Because the Pulsar Turbo has a 4-inch inlet, we need to adapt an air filter to it. So what we're going to be doing is using a Raceworks 4-inch silicon bend, a 4-inch 45 stainless bend, and the BMC 4-inch pod filter.
Now, because the air intake is going to be on the turbo side now, the battery is actually going to be in the way. So we've gone with our Demon Pro Parts battery relocation kit, which is going to take it from the position it's in now and move it to the passenger side.
Okay, now the last 3 pieces in this turbo conversion kit are a fuel pump, a fuel pressure regulator, and a map sensor. The factory FG fuel pump will not cut the mustard. So we have opted for a Walbro 255, also known as the TI Automotive 255. For the fuel pressure regulator, we'll be using the Herco 4-bar regulator. We've done a previous video testing them, showing that it does increase the fuel pressure from the factory 2.8 bar to 4 bar, essentially giving us a few more cc's out of our injectors.
Now the factory NA map sensor doesn't really like to see positive pressure, so we've gone with a genuine Bosch turbo map sensor, and now this is a BABF one, so it will plug directly into our FG NA loom.
Okay, now that we've gone over all the parts that we'll be using in this turbo conversion, we're going to actually take the car down to Checker Tuning and see Trent and Kat to run the car up on the dyno to get a power figure and a torque figure. What this is going to allow us to do is when we take the car back to Trent to have it retuned for the turbo, it's going to give us another figure. What that's going to do is allow us to compare the two figures and give a percentage increase in power and torque. The reason why we're going back to the same dyno is because it's going to be the same settings and the same tuner. We could take it down to another tuner, but what's going to happen is that we won't be running the same settings. It's a completely different scenario, and it won't really be comparable. So we won't actually get a fantastic idea of what actually increased, and neither will you. So
Off to Trent and Kat we go.
off we go.
Alrighty, dyno day. On the way down to Checker Tuning right now, and going to be pretty interesting to see what the old stock FG will put out. You know, obviously rated at 195 kilowatt from factory at the flywheel. So, you know, after we take the transmission out of that, a few years of abuse, I don't know, roughly around 140 or something. Would be good to see what it pulls. There we have it, 137.2 kilowatts as our baseline. We did have a slight issue with speed cut here in this purple line. So we removed the speed limiter and it peaked it there at 137. All right, so there we have it. Back from Checker Tuning with 137.2 kilowatts on our NA Barra.
I'm so glad you actually mentioned the 0.2 kilowatts.
Have to.
No, but in all seriousness, it's actually a fantastic outcome because we actually had no idea whether this motor was healthy or not. Like we mentioned earlier, it was an unknown motor just dropped in. So in the next episode, what we're going to be doing is putting all these parts into the car and going from there.
Yeah, so make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video.